Okay, guys, we are live with our first panel today, the community panel about how a community can be an ultimate multiplier. Today, joining us, we have Vamsi Madhav from Sahamati, we have Abhishant from Fintech Meetup, and we have Rahul from Bhima Pay. Now, each of them over the last few years have pulled off pretty much the impossible with Vamsi setting up behind the scenes with Sahamati and pulling off the account aggregator launch. Abhishant catalyzing the entire fintech ecosystem across India, and Rahul with uh, his own community and building in public. That again has been a fantastic experience, and I'm sure a lot of us in the audience have been tracking that. So Dheeraj, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nikhil. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our panel discussion. As Nikhil said, we had a fantastic AO live event the day before yesterday. And I would like to take a moment here first and congratulate Sahamati, iSpirit, and everyone involved for this remarkable and historical milestone. It has set the first and firm footprint in the open digital space. So, requesting the audience to spam the emojis below. Thank you. So of course, it has been a community-led effort, which makes it only vital to talk and spread awareness how community can be the ultimate multiplier. So we hope the next half an hour or so sets the stage to provide the builders a pathway to participate and thrive in the upcoming digital ecosystem spaces. With this, I'd like to kick off the session, and I would invite the audience to post their questions in the chat box, and we'll be taking them at the end. So starting with you, Vamsi, account aggregator being the fastest growing community with Sahamati playing an important role in its growth. And now we have the A launch officially behind us. What can the stakeholders expect next from Sahamati? And also if you could reflect on the A community journey till now.
Sure, Dheeraj, and very happy to kind of be here. Good timing for the event. There's something to
Yep.
show.
Yes, for sure.
But I think what's next for the account aggregator ecosystem, clearly, you know, a start has been made, and if the precedences of UPI and several other open digital ecosystems are any indicator, we are obviously at the you know looking at a 10x or a 100x scale up of all metrics that any of us would like to measure, right? Whether it is number of participants, number of citizens, number of transactions, etc. So, in the coming months, we will, I think all of us need to be heads down. You cannot game, what will happen when, because there are several forces, the market, the regulator, the community, all of which have to be aligned. But there are some clear, milestones to hit. We've got a great start with the largest banks already having adopted A. Now we've got to actually track usage and promotion by them. Uh, Number two, we've got to expand the types of accounts and financial information types that are accessible. Today, the market is started with single-owned retail accounts and current accounts. Very quickly, we'll have to scale up to other forms of accounts in terms of ownership, joint accounts to be specific, and also move on to corporate accounts because there are a lot of use cases that will be built around those. And then expand into other types of financial information. So from deposit information, moving on to time deposits, recurring deposits, credit cards, and then moving on to the other sectors outside of bank. We've got very early forays from insurance and securities coming in, so we will be looking at getting the first early adopters in those sectors in the next few months. And most importantly, perhaps, is to watch the rails because I think all of this is great only if you have got a very robust, technical rails working. Most of you are the unsung heroes behind all of this, right? And I think it's important that that continues to be very robust, and there's a lot of work to be done there. We've all been there, done that. You know that this has to happen iteratively, and you've got to watch it. So these are the various things that I think we will look at. Just take a minute on your second question, because I think that's the real, to me personally, what's been very interesting, and a very interesting learning as well, is how complementarity can be driven between regulators and the market in driving ecosystem standards. Um, in a very unique way, perhaps. Uh, I'm not sure if this was by design or whether it is accidental, but account aggregator ecosystem is perhaps the first ecosystem in which the regulatory authorities have defined the directions and have defined the tech standards, but the actual process of uh, enabling implementation of those, and guiding the implementation and further evolving market guidelines and market standards has been left to the market. And Sahamati was born out of that need 2 years ago, right? And so, a large part of what you see happening, while Sahamati is just a name, we are indeed well and truly an alliance. I have personally, in the last 12 months, run forums of people who are in the ecosystem, building for the ecosystem. All the account aggregators you see today, all the technology service providers who were the early, bringers on of the banks, etc. They've gone through the pain of seeing the gaps, and what's been very fascinating is bringing them on board a common platform, and everybody realizing that, you know cooperation is the new name of the game, right? So you
That's
cannot have very proprietary mindsets when it comes to building ecosystems. So you do compete in the market, but when you have to build something that's a common rail, you've got to share your own experience and you've got to share solutions. So that's been very fascinating. I think that'll only get stronger now.
that's very insightful, Vamsi. Thank you for that. So continuing on the same thread, coming to you, Abhishant, since ODEs like A are going live, and you have traveled the road to meet new and upcoming entrepreneurs and provided a platform across different communities, do you think builders should look to rally in the ODE space, and how they can reach you?
So, first and foremost, I think this is an interesting moment. Interesting moment from the point of view of providing that last mile guy. So, last mile guy. Who do I mean by last mile guy? Is not somebody. Even in the urban world, we see the urban slum dweller. Not that last mile guy. In my mind, is around 7 months back, while in Mukteshwar, traveling to one of the trek around 3 odd kilometer from the main road, 45 odd minute walk. We reach a Maggie point, and at that Maggie point, of course, there was no Airtel Vodafone connectivity. There was a Geo connectivity available. Wanted to pay him via UPI. He offering his Geo hotspot, and we paying him via that. That is what you call as the last mile guy who is away from road almost 45 minutes away. Now, to that guy, if you have enabled him with digital footprints across the value chains again and again and again, and we being digital natives in a way, reaching him, somebody who's of the same age group, so called, somebody who is possibly a Rahul's age group, 24 saal ka ladka, trying to, obviously, he's running a Maggie shop, Rahul is running Bima Pay, but but from a digital thought process point of view, both belong to the same world. And when you enable that guy with helping him create those digital footprints, this value chain of A is essentially an ode to that digital footprint in its truest sense, enabling him at every footprint that he enables at that point of time. think of the fact that tomorrow I can possibly look at sachizing insurance with PhonePe, wherein I am in a position to offer that guy, or maybe intellectualize it a bit to say that for every single transaction which gets performed at that point of time in PhonePe using UPI, there is a sachized proposition of insurance which enables that guy that moment for that day. And that, when it gets built on top of the access to account aggregator value chain, is something which becomes powerful enough to bring all of those things to him on sachet, which when I was working with M-Pesa around 8 years back, we had thought that we'll have that, which is sachetized offering of credit, insurance, and payments being the railroad which drive that all. I think this, therefore, in that sense, is the great piece from a builder perspective. When you say in the builder sense, yeah, my belief is that when you look at last mile, at that point of time in that village in Mukteshwar, the closest financial institution is Uttarakhand Gramin Sahkari Bank. Is not PhonePe, is not others, but PhonePe has reached where Uttarakhand Gramin Sahkari Bank has not reached in terms of day-to-day connectivity. But we need those community institutions as the last mile builders as well to survive, to be able to serve this community. Now, for that to happen, what I believe is the builder should ideally go out and connect with these last mile financial institutions, get them on the digital bandwagon, and get them from a community lens point of view, engage with the community last mile guy, buy the digital value chains, and not make these last mile financial institutions irrelevant. Because what will happen over the period of time is that if this value chain continues like this without involvement of last mile financial institutions, which are community based localized value chains, those institutions will perish. So therefore we need a builder from the point of view of a pinnacle for Bharat, which essentially enables this last mile financial institution to be able to cater to this last mile guy, with Rahul and others bringing those microservices which enable them at all point of the intersection that we can, and AI essentially becomes an interesting layer on top of that. That's my initial submission here.
That's really interesting, and surely each ode can definitely provide for accessibility and reachability to the last mile, and I'm sure builders would take up on this and build on that. And to my second question, how do these builders reach to you with these opportunities or their projects or their ideas?
So we connect with these builders in any case via Yatra, via boot camps, and via multiple other mediums. We will intend to essentially continue to do that. In any case, there are enough and more public forums on which our details are available to connect with us. And via Yatra, we'll connect this year again. We'll move out again on road sometime in November. We'll again map the country, and in that process, we'll look forward to connect with them here. And enough and more financial institutions are willing to work with these builders to be able to create last mile solutions.
That's great. So I hope everyone in the audience is listening to Abhishant. And to be honest, the best time to reach Abhishant, since he's always on the road, is right now. Catch him in the networking lounge after the session for sure. All right. So going ahead. So since community is the keyword here, and who better than you, Rahul, who has built an amazingly well and tight-knit community, active community around Bima Pay. What came first though, the community or Bima Pay? And have they complemented, or how have they complemented each other?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me here. And I definitely say, there's some people like Abhishant who knew, what they really wanted to do, what their mission was as an individual, as a company, and therefore, rallied a community around, that idea. But it's definitely possible, just like for us at Bima Pay, we didn't even have a company name, we didn't have a product. We kind of knew we wanted to do something in insurance, and we said, let's go out there, let's be open and transparent, let's see what the community wants, and then use that pool of a community to find, market product fit in terms of what we should build and why should we build it. The one lesson over there is community. This is not like that golden chicken and egg problem where there is no solution, because the answer is you can put community before product and company, or you can do product, company, and then community. You just really need to think about what are you building. So if you're building a product company, I'd say community is important for you to get that early market product fit, that first 1000 true fans who really love you. But if you are building, on an open platform, or if you're building something in terms of a developer experience, which is what the ODE is all about, then you really need to think about community from the get-go, because you will have this sort of network effect of sorts kicking in, where more developers who end up using your developer tools on this open protocol, the more valuable your developer tools become, and they almost become like a standard. And I think a great example of this, a lot of people heard of Postman's recent raise. And ever since I was in college in 2017, almost all of my friends, including me, who were slightly more geared towards writing code on GitHub, were all going berserk about this API thing. And even then, as young people, Postman had almost become synonymous with API. And that is because you don't realize this, but there is a lot of community work which they were doing behind the scenes, sponsoring events, actually putting people on physical events, since there was a pre COVID era. So the simple answer to this is think about whether what you're building is a product or a platform, or developer tools on top of open platforms. And the third example is kind of what the India stack enables for us, right? We've got a lot of the base layer complexity completely abstracted, and now people are trying to build this developer experience and then an application layer. I think anyone looking to build on the developer experience is probably going to have to focus on community from the get-go, because that is what will keep increasing the value of whatever company or project you're working on. And ultimately, if you're working on the application layer of the India stack, it's still becoming a bit more like a company. So maybe community is more valuable to find market product fit, and may just drive better scale economies. So that's sort of how I'd summarize it. And ultimately, a lot of people on this call do know that the cost of customer acquisition, whether it's offline, online in India, is ridiculously high right now. You don't need any evidence. You can go out there and check the spend. Any customer whom you can get in for free and engage with as a member of a community, whether you're pre-product, post-product, or even no product, is just immensely valuable for your company. So that's how I try to answer it. Thank you.
That's very interesting, and thank you for that perspective. Community building is an evolving task, and your pointers definitely would help to progress in the right direction. Thank you. So coming back to you, Vamsi, Rahul just mentioned about things about GitHub. So I have a question based on that, and that's it. It is a two-part question. One, how can folks work with Sahamati, learn more about the AA ecosystem? And second, what are the volunteering opportunities for builders at Sahamati?
Okay, so firstly, being a non-profit alliance, a lot of the work that is happening is actually happening by volunteers at different levels from different backgrounds, and people who have their own reasons to do this, and several people have several reasons. Some are directly from the ecosystem and look at this as an opportunity to learn. Some are folks who have day jobs and just need something to kind of feel good about, and and join. And we've got, so I've been working with people and across a wide varieties of experience spectrums. People fresh from college to people like me, whose hair has obviously been spent in been fighting a lot of battles. But I'd encourage anybody interested in looking up our volunteer page on Sahamati. We will get far more organized in terms of the content and the needs that we have out there. But big open arm welcome to anybody that wishes to join forces. And I don't say this just as a cliche. I think I have personally realized the power of just a reach out. There are several of us. Look, none of us is really working on theoretical physics here, right? Where you've got to, sit in an ivory tower and kind of come up with some brilliant cosmological model. You're doing stuff which is very real, and many of us have truly adopted the agile, fail fast, incremental, iterative approach over the years. And that fundamentally means that you've got to stop thinking, start doing, and find that right balance. And I've noticed that when you have people who volunteer, there is a need to show something, and that need to show something creates something. It may not be the best thing out there, but it works, and then people build on it. So that model is very fascinating to me personally. So and therefore taking that to a little more formal structure and your GitHub reference. Firstly, to everybody in the audience, Dheeraj has and Nikhil have been phenomenal in terms of their own volunteering, with Sahamati, and I'm sure whatever they're doing here is all part of that whole ethos. And so one of the things that we'd really like to do is now, look, we essentially want to be the intermediary between the market and all the innovation and thinking and regulators. I've been working very closely with Rabbit, and Revit as a regulatory body has actually embraced right from the start, 2018 onwards, working closely with market stakeholders to actually come up with the first set of standards. So there's been a fairly open mindset, which is again very unique, given that they're a regulatory body, to work with the market and crowdsource a lot of the thought process, etc. Of course, initially it's a bunch of so-called expert volunteers, your iSpirit think tank guys who are behind the India stack and so on. But in the last couple of years, and now it's actually they're trying to formalize the whole process of getting account aggregators, involved with a cadence that's kind of fairly reasonable to get feedback. What we'd like to do is part of what we want to do is harness feedback from the market and be a conduit to feeding that to Revit to say, hey, here's the feedback, here's how the spec should evolve. Because all said and done, it's a half empty, half full, situation all the time. You have something that works, but then the moment you see what that is, 10 things that could come better, right? And then you need to keep on ensuring that evolves. And that's not easy. So what we'd like to do is between now and 15th of September, formalize Sahamati GitHub approach where there'll be repositories dedicated to A, the spec, B, what's, I think Dheeraj has coined this awesome AA, which is essentially a collection of libraries and tools over and above the spec itself. And C, one of the earliest, in fact, community assets that we got was an encryption decryption library, which is now codenamed Rahasya, right? And that essentially is what the ecosystem has used for implementing in an interoperable manner the Revit spec. It's called Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and this was born out of months of pain where the initial adopters actually thought they had implemented the spec, and when we all started testing, we found out that things were breaking. And so we roped in an expert, Shashi, who's worked on the India's Aadhaar security spec, and he said, look, I'm going to build something which I think can be a good reference. And then that became Rahasya, and then that became the basis for everybody to test their implementations against. And today we've got, as of today, we've got thousands of citizens who've successfully used AA. And I must tell you very, very happily that while obviously there have been teething issues, etc., I have not had, touch wood, and I hope nobody proves me wrong right after this call, I have not had a single call saying, bhai, sab kuch theek hai, but data mila, khali mila, or data is not proper. People have actually made loans, which means that, the whole encryption, decryption, etc. is working. So Rahasya now, and we've had a few people who've actually called out some, contributions they can make. So we will kind of create this ecosystem of contributions across these three. And, we want to create a process where there is a review process, an approval process, and then we will, with a certain cadence, make a formal kind of a conduit to Revit. Let's see how that works, where we say, hey, look, for your next version of the spec, here's a bunch of feedback that's come from the market. Why don't you standardize it, right? And so that's what we'd like to do. Dheeraj has been putting that whole process a lot. So I'm just the mouthpiece here, but Dheeraj, more power to you as and when you put that in place for us.
Sure. Thank you for that, Vamsi. And full disclaimer, as Vamsi said, I am an active volunteer at Sahamati, and I have been putting up few things for all the developer community to come and build on. So do visit the Sahamati GitHub repositories, give them a star, and start exploring. All right, coming back. Thank you, Vamsi. Coming back to Abhishant. Now you have built a lot of fintechs over the years now, fintech communities over the years now, and could you share some instances where the community has stepped up and come through? And I think the insights from this would help us to see the power of community.
Yeah, sure. So, एक तो around few years back, I think 3 साल पहले, we started working with Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology on creation of Mighty Startup Hub. The purpose of that was essentially to kind of bring together these startups which were part of the Tide ecosystem. So Tide is an ecosystem created by the IT ministry for the purpose of engaging with essentially the engineering institutions largely around that, and that's how that ecosystem started evolving. uh, 2 years back they reached out to us stating that, boss, can you help us in bringing this ecosystem together? Can you help us in formalizing this value chain? Can you bring some certain set of external internal stakeholders into this value chain and all? And since then, frankly, even during the COVID times, I saw them actively engaging, actively reviewing, actively trying to identify what else they can do, including the fact that last year March, 24th of March, there was not 24th, the letter got issued, but first week of March, we all went to Delhi, made a presentation to Ajay Sahani, the IT secretary, wherein we shared what can be done. And 8th March, we made a presentation. 24th March, the letter got issued, and number of accelerator or incubator institutions actually got funding to drive that value chain in their ecosystems. And then it kept on getting reviewed every 3 months, even during the COVID times, via, of course, the Zoom led conversations happened. But that is something which could clearly be driven from top to bottom. And this is one of the instances wherein I saw both the IT secretary and the value chains below him actively engaging. While one of the architect of that value proposition was Gopal Krishnan, as जो कि अभी PMO में है, additional secretary, and he was very very actively involved in that entire process. So in my view, if you want to drive large scale ecosystem led changes involving government and involving progressive IAS officers is something which should be done. As I said, that in some of these instances, we seriously found people who were good, amazing joint secretaries, IT secretaries, and because of them, we could drive a lot of things. On our own, what we have done is that we essentially when we started building Yatra 3 years back, we started building active community and active ecosystem across the cities. So Nikhil is part of one of the city ecosystems which we have built for Pune, which is fintech specific, and we are building that ecosystem across other cities. So we will be possibly live with those ecosystems in next 8 to 10 days time, with each city being there, each major city getting covered into that. I think what one of the point initially one of us spoke about that, which is when you create an ecosystem, it's essentially for greater common good. And our belief is that if we essentially build something which is for greater common good, we'll in any case grow with that. And that if that intention is clear, I think those ecosystems grow. Otherwise, most of the ecosystems, while they start with the idea, but then they, over the period of time, vested interests make them non-inclusive in nature. I think that's what can be avoided. As I said, that working with the central government, working with state government, I have We have helped in formation of fintech policy of Tamil Nadu government for some parts of Bangalore, but Karnataka. We helped in creation of fintech policy for Maharashtra government. We helped the central government do a number of things. In all these instances, the only right thing that I believe we did is that in all our policy interventions, we found the right IS officer to drive that value chain, who was personally motivated to do that without vested interest. And every single time it worked because he was willing to pick up phone, make calls, and drive that value chain. So in my mind, large scale changes can be brought in by bringing those people. Specific interventions, all of us keep on doing, and we'll continue to do. We'll continue to kind of engage with all stakeholders into that.
That's amazing, Vishant. And I can definitely feel the need for the bridge that you're essentially building, and the ease it is going to provide to the next generation of builders. So thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Abhishant, again. So coming back to you, Rahul, and I think we are short on time, so I'll will be finishing with this. So now that we understand the power of community, what advice would you give, or what advice do you have for the builders joining into in community building or about community building?
Yeah. So I think I'll assume there are two kinds of builders in each community, right? There is the builder who's someone who is doing non-technical, which is like the ground level community building and retention, which is often underappreciated, right? They are also builders. And then there is a builder in the context of an ODE who is actually a software engineer, product manager who's looking to build that application or something on top of the protocol. I think it's very easy for the latter, right? Because you are just doing what you always love doing, which is sitting there and writing code. But I think for the person who's looking to really sort of catalyze that community, right, which is the community building exercise itself, I think Abhishant's point was actually something which I was hoping to mention, but I'd broaden it, beyond just a government, public-private partnership to a general community as well. Let's say you're looking to target people who are underserved, say for a certain financial product in a certain region. You have to go to that key opinion leader, the KOL. This could be, as Abhishant sir has pointed out, someone who's on ground, who's well known, who can give you that early push. And that's always like the first thing there. The other point which I'd say for most community builders is there is you have to think of community like a product, right? You can't just say, the community which I am a part of is saying we want to do X, therefore we will do X. If you're really the person building the community, you're that community leader, for lack of words, you need to also think of it from a product manager's mindset, right? Which is the community is saying X, but why are they saying X? And is Y, which is what they're asking for, actually what you should be delivering to them, right? Because the end outcome in this old mindset of creating the community is to build something which can either be used at the application layer by an end customer or at the platform layer by an engineer with a superior developer experience to end up building an application. So the way I approach it is, if you're a community builder, think of community as a product and approach your job or this hobby as a product manager would, right? Prioritize, really think very deeply about what the root cause of the problem is and whether the solution you're building is solving that superficial request or that actual need which is not being surfaced. So that's how I'd approach it. I mean, it's like a product manager.
Interesting perspective for sure. Thank you for that, Rahul. So with that, I think we are over time. So I would like to thank you all for a very rich session. And unless we have questions, I think we can wrap up for today.
Thanks, Dheeraj. Thanks, Vamsi. Thanks, Rahul.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you,
you all.
everyone.
Rahul.
Great session. Thank you.